Kia ora, and welcome to this information session with June Ransom, the Chief Executive of Woburn International. Good afternoon, I'm Patrick McKibben. I'm the CEO of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce, and we are privileged today to have June Ransom, who is also one of our board members here at the Chamber of Commerce. And she is joining me today to update us on the changes that have been taking place with Immigration New Zealand. June set up Woburn International in 1991, and they have become New Zealand's leading specialists in New Zealand immigration, assisting employers to gain and retain skilled staff, working with migrants to maintain a lawful presence in New Zealand, offshore entrepreneurs to invest their skills and funds into New Zealand businesses, along with investors to grow New Zealand's economy, and finally settlement support, home finding and assimilation into New Zealand. June became the chairperson of NZAMI in 2015. NZAMI is New Zealand's leading professional association for immigration practitioners and has been operating since 1989. They work closely with the government, Immigration New Zealand, and the Immigration Advisors Authority. Key objectives of NZAMI is to ensure fair and natural justice is applied by the government with a commitment to playing a major role in building the professionalism of the immigration industry in New Zealand. June is joined today by Shaun Redpath. Shaun is an executive specialist for the immigration team at Woburn International, and he's been part of June's team for a number of years. If you have any questions at the end of this video, please contact us by commenting on the post or reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce, and we'll be able to pass those questions on. Thank you for watching, and we hope you find this useful. June, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to have you here. It's great to see you, and great that you could join us too, Shaun. Thank you very much. Look, I understand there's been numerous changes and updates to the immigration regulations, including further changes to the Employer Accreditation Scheme announced in the middle of last year, that you were able to update us as part of that session. But before we talk about the accreditation scheme, the skills shortage that we have in New Zealand has been having a major impact on our business community here in the Hutt Valley and across New Zealand. Every conversation that I'm having with business owners refers to their need for talent and their desperate need to fill jobs in most of their businesses. Some of this has been driven by the lack of immigration workers to fill jobs. But the question really is, how has reopening the borders helped with this situation, June?
Well, at this stage, it hasn't, because it's only coming from Australia, those folk, and most of our workers are coming from other parts of the world. Now, the working holiday scheme, which is going to be reopened in a staggered manner, the 16th of March into the 13th of September, these people will help in the hospitality and the aged care, and they will fill temporary roles. Now, how many of these people will be actually fully skilled, we don't know, but because they are here supplementing their holiday earnings, but they do fill a very valuable area in the hospitality, aged care, and other areas like that. So it's a little early to really see what's going to happen.
Okay. So we know, for example, that some companies have staff members who have been on a visa, have been stuck overseas since the pandemic. When can they return?
Well, it's not as difficult as it used to be. So if you're looking at those who are wanting to bring the employees in, it really does come down to the salary. So what they're going to be doing is that it's looking at the salary of $84,240, which equates to $40.50 an hour. And if they're earning less, they have to be able to prove specialist skills and that no one else in New Zealand is available, and that's through advertising. Now, the other critical pathway, which employers will be familiar with or aware of. It's a two-step process, and it's applying for an exemption. And as I said, it's not as onerous as it was. And the two steps, they're worth going through. The timeline for actually getting these special visas for getting through the system is a month. So, yeah, every case is different, but it is less complex than how it has been.
Fantastic. We've previously talked about some of the delays in processing applications. Have those delays disappeared, June? You talk about a month there.
Well, that's on that particular pathway, the other critical worker, but there are other pathways where I know employers are getting frustrated because for the staff that are actually in New Zealand waiting for their visas to be renewed, there is still a wait time, very much so.
Okay, cool. And if an employee who's of an organisation who holds a temporary visa and is already in New Zealand, can they now travel overseas and come back easily?
Absolutely.
Great.
From the 13th of April, providing they're fully vaccinated.
Right. Brilliant. Okay, that's a big step forward then. Okay, so we'd love now to talk about the Employer Accreditation Scheme. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the Employer Accreditation Scheme and the changes that have been made since it was first announced?
Well, we're still waiting for a lot more information to come through. What I can make you aware is that we have been notified that as from May this year, employers are going to be allowed to lodge their application for the new accreditation. However, what the requirements are, we don't know. Apart from knowing that the employer must be very credible and have a clean employment background, but the actual details we don't know. It's going to go live from July the 4th. So unless the employer actually becomes accredited, they're not going to be able to employ new migrant workers. Now, the information that we do hold and what we can tell you is that there will be two types of accreditation. These will be what is known as standard and high volume. Now, the standard one is for those employers who are looking at, say, employing up to 5 migrant workers in a year, because the accreditation is only going to be issued for 1 year initially. The high volume is for those employers wanting to employ 6 or more migrant workers. So the difference between the two, the high volume and the standard, is that there's going to be a lot of tighter requirements to meet and gain the accreditation. And there will be different requirements, again, on the employer who is part of a franchise, or employers wanting to place migrants with third parties. And this is very much applicable to labour hire companies. Now, the other issues you need to be aware of is that for those employers who have been very familiar with the employer accreditation, which no longer exists for you to recruit people under, which used to give the benefit of giving work to residence visas, that has closed. So once the employer gains this new accreditation that is coming in, it's going to be a 3-step process. And firstly, once you've got it, the employer is going to be involved in the job check, and the job check confirms the job pays the market rate, the terms and conditions comply with employment laws and standards, and proving that you've done the necessary labour market tests. And for the positions, it will mean that advertising, there will sometimes depend on salary, location, and position. They're some of the key things. Shaun, would you like to comment?
Yeah, obviously, as you said, there's still lots of information to come, but yeah, it's 3 steps. The first step will be the employer check, or the accreditation process. The next is the job check, where they look at the job and that you're paying market rate, and then it's the migrant check, which is where the migrant makes the application once the first 2 checks are done. But yeah, we're still waiting for more detail about everything. But from what we have heard, it's going to be quite a different process than we've seen previously.
I think one aspect that employers probably aren't aware of is that once you've actually got a migrant worker with your company, and so they've got through the accreditation system, there's a requirement that that migrant must undertake a module on working in New Zealand. And this has to be done in his paid working hours. And it's all about ensuring that the migrant is fully aware of all the labour law conditions that would impact on him being engaged by that employer. It is to avoid exploitation by employers.
Great. So it sounds like there's some good checks and balances there in the system.
Yes.
To protect the new migrants to New Zealand, which sounds great. Do we have an idea at this stage what that accreditation process might cost, how long it might last?
No. We know that initially it will be for 12 months. But with regard to the cost, no, that is a hidden secret.
Right, so something to look forward to, no doubt.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. And does this have an effect at all on the existing migrant workers that an employer has already in their business?
No. The only thing that needs to be considered here is if their existing visas come up for expiring and they've got to apply for new visas, they are already engaged by that employer, and the employer does need to look at, are they holding an open work visa? And an open work visa means that they can work for any employer. So that doesn't come into play, but it's for new migrants being recruited.
Right, and so I'm going to make an assumption here that the existing migrants won't be included in the numbers of the 2 options of five or less workers or 6 or more. Is that correct for the new accreditation scheme?
Shaun, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so if they're on an essential skills currently, they won't be included until obviously the time comes for that essential skills to expire, and they'll need a new visa, and then they'd be moving on to the accredited employer work visa and would be included on those numbers. But any current staff on different types of visas won't be included until the expiry date of their current visa, and if they're going to be moving on to the accredited employer work visa.
Right. Okay. So there may be a situation there where an employer is moving between one of those options, 5 when they've already applied for 5, and then one of their existing migrants moves over to that scheme. They're now in the second option. Something for employers to keep an eye on, I guess.
Yeah. So they'd need to upgrade to the high volume accreditation. But yeah, there's still more information about that process to come.
Okay. And any time frame on that
Yeah, we are in the
information coming?
dark. Yeah, we're in the dark on a lot of this.
Right. Okay. Good news. So we're going to move on now to a couple of questions around the once an employer is accredited and how it might affect any employees that they already have in their organisation. Do you have any information on that, June? We just covered a little bit of that, but do you have any more information which might be useful to our listeners?
So basically, what happens after they are accredited? Well, it does go through this the process where the employer does have to prove that they really do need these people. They're the key things, and it's the job check, and then they go through and looking at the migrant check. So they just want to make sure that the worker is actually going to meet the requirements. And they also need, of course, to meet the health and character checks.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. It may be too soon to answer this, but can migrants who become employees of a company, is there a pathway towards residency from this new accreditation scheme?
Well, once again, it comes down to the salary. So only those that are actually paid the highest salary, and this is currently set at 200% over the median wage. So that brings it to 112,320 per annum. Yeah, so that's going to be the key parts of this, and the employees must have held and been with that accredited employer for 2 years before they can in fact apply.
Okay. And just thinking about if I have existing migrant workers, but don't apply to be, do I have to apply to be accredited if I don't want any more migrant workers at this stage, or what do I need to do in that case?
No, if you're not employing any new migrant workers, you don't need to become accredited. But do remember that if their visas are coming to expire, the employer would need to become accredited.
Okay.
To re-engage them.
Yeah,
There's
that's
no
great.
such thing as a visa renewal. It goes back right to the beginning.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. That's great information. So now looking forward to employers thinking about the accreditation scheme as an option for their business at the moment. Well, what should they be starting to prepare for in thinking about the accreditation scheme? What can they do now that will help them when the final details of the scheme actually are available?
Well, one of the things that I'd be saying is that employers really should be looking at their staff and looking at when are their current temporary visas going to expire. And if they're about 2 months out, they should be renewing it on the current basis because they're probably going to get a better length of time for those visas rather than getting it under the accreditation. Look, employers need to be aware this is really driven by the unions, and the unions are really wanting to get more and more involved in employers' companies. It is far more straightforward for an employer to be able to get and support their migrant employee to get a brand new visa than waiting for the accreditation to come through. So, okay, for the accreditation, when they've got to have to do it, and as I said, that comes into force officially in July. We don't know how long they're going to take to process them. We've got no idea at all. And you could have an employer who's so desperate for a migrant employee, he could be left hanging, waiting. So I would do your homework first. Look at your existing staff and look and see what you can do for them.
Right. So get on and help those existing staff early, and
yes,
then worry about the accreditation scheme later.
That's correct.
Right. Okay, cool. So just wanted to touch finally before we finish and give you a chance to add any other information. There's obviously a very unfortunate situation happening on the other side of the world in Ukraine with the war there. We've already had at the Chamber some of our employers asking how they might be able to make contact with any Ukrainian workers that might come here under the recently announced visas for family members of Ukrainians to enter New Zealand. I think there's 4,000 places under that scheme. Are you able to tell us anything more about that scheme and how employers might be able to connect into people coming to New Zealand under that visa scheme?
Well, what we can tell you, because this has been one of the releases that have just come through, is that the offshore, when the migrant, the Ukrainian is offshore, the New Zealand sponsor, they must be Ukrainian, holding a New Zealand residence or citizenship, and they can, in fact, sponsor their family. And it can be the brother, sister, mother, grandparent, any of the supporting ones, they can in fact do that. And there are limitations. It's only up for a period of 2 years, but this will help them initially, and then other visas will step in because they will get a Ukrainian in New Zealand will get 12 months extension. So they are doing what they can to accommodate these people. So, for example, the type of visas there are is a 2-year visa to help them escape the current conflict. And that visa does have work visa rights for their children, and the children go to school, which is good. And once again, the limitations are there of the 2 years. But it does help the Ukrainians in being able to progress. Now, those that are actually in New Zealand and their visas are due to expire, the Ukrainians, once again, they're going to be getting 12 months extension. But this is totally separate to being sponsored, which I spoke about before on the application type.
Yeah. Is there likely to be, I mean, privacy requirements aside, is there likely to be a way that employers can connect with people that are coming on those sponsored visas to offer them employment, or at least understand what skills they might have to and where they're heading, so that the employers could reach out to them?
Look, what I do know is that there is investigations and a review going on with regard to refugees coming through this, but nothing has been made public knowledge yet. But I do know that that is very much a work in progress. So what we're saying here is that if there is a New Zealand sponsor and they've come from the Ukraine at some stage and they hold New Zealand residence or citizenship, they can sponsor their families. But when it comes to the employers wanting to grab hold of these poor folk over in the Ukraine, we've got to wait and see from the refugee side.
Okay, cool. All right, that's fantastic. So, is there any last words of wisdom, June or Shaun, that we can share with our employers about the accreditation scheme or the visa situation? Any last words that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, look, I do think people should be aware of this special residence classification that was brought in by the government. It was called the 2021 new residence visa, and they should be looking, if they've got valued staff, they should in fact be encouraging them to be assessed to see whether they can get this residence, because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and many people prior to this would never have got the chance to get residence. And it's a really good time to look at utilising this pathway. and it just gives their employees some certainty in New Zealand. I mean, I know of employers that are actually looking at really supporting their employees, their migrant employees, and some of them are bonding them because they're picking up all the fees for this process. I mean, those that are eligible, they have to have been in New Zealand on the 29th of September. And there is a criteria that they have to be on one of the 14 eligible visa types, as well as meeting one of the 3 criterias, which covers things like settled, scarce, and skilled, and it's identifying theirs. But I mean, if people make contact, we can in fact give them some guidance.
Brilliant. And just remind me, is there a name for that type of visa, and when can employers and eligible people start applying for that visa?
Well, it's only open now from March until July this year. It's the 2021 new residence visa.
Great. Okay.
When they originally brought this in, they announced it in I think it was the September. There were 2 types of phases for this. One came into being at the beginning of December, and now we have the phase 2, which is for those persons who meet the criteria of settled, skilled, or they're in scarce types of work. And that covers ranges of roles from being doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers, chefs, cooks, farm workers. There's a broad range, so it's really worth exploring. If you've got somebody you want to help, I'd really say, do look at it for them.
Brilliant. Okay.
Shaun, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think you've covered it all. Yeah, as you say, the 2021 is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for many people to get resident. So just if you've got any employees who you want to help out, just make sure, check with them, and it could be, as you say, their opportunity to stay in New Zealand and really be settled.
Fantastic. And there's a short window for that, so get onto it now.
Yeah,
by the sound
end
of things.
of July, so a few months to go.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, look, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. As always, June, your wealth of knowledge and willingness to share your knowledge with our listeners is very much appreciated. I would highly kind of recommend anybody that needs support or help to reach out to June or Shaun at Woburn International. They'll only be too willing to support you or offer you advice, I'm sure. So thank you for taking time to watch this video today. The Chamber of Commerce, as we said earlier, is here to help. So if you do have any questions, please either ask those questions on the post that you're watching now, or reach out to us at the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce, and we'll be only too pleased to put you in touch with June to answer the questions that you've got. So thank you very much. Thank you again, June and Shaun, and I wish everybody a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.